Badoom! Holy smokes, look at that! Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet. As I'm guessing basically everybody who found their way to this video already knows, they are new Pokémon games. They were announced a few days ago and they are coming this year. I wasn't planning on making a video about it. The Pokemon specialist channels have probably started dissecting it frame by frame the absolute minute after the trailer dropped, desperately trying to squeeze out as much content as possible from guesswork and conjecture as they could, surely with lots of arrows and circles on their thumbnails. Don't you guys love that stuff? And yes, I know I do it too sometimes, but I do it ironically. But that kind of content is not really my bag. Nothing against the creators whose bag that is. I just don't do that. I was going to wait to even talk much about it at all until we got some real gameplay, at least some real details. Probably around June or July is a safe guess, with or around the E3's hype cycle. But there is something I've seen come up in reaction to the trailer and the bigger surprise of the release date that I do want to talk about today. It's been sitting on my mind, and it's one of those days where if I don't say something, it's just going to sit at the back of my mind all day and distract me, and I won't be able to get anything else useful done. So let's have a chat about it. Hello again, I am Blunty. I've been playing Pokemon games since Gen 1, and let me know in the down below where you jumped on board with this series. How early were you? And did you buy hardware to play them on? Because I can tell you, the only big reason I personally owned a Game Boy Color, a Game Boy Advance, Game Boy SP, a Nintendo DS, and 3DS, almost exclusively to play Pokemon. The Switch is another matter, although I have been hearing stories from people who bought a Nintendo Switch exclusively to play Nintendo Legends Arceus. That was what it took for them to pull the trigger, so that's interesting. Anyway, that big criticism I felt the need to actually address, the silly notion that releasing two major Pokemon titles in the same year, made by the same developers, means that Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet are rushed. The argument is, two big Pokemon games from the same developer in the same year means this game is just going to be rushed and buggy and half-assed, and they're going to cut a lot of corners. And for the last several years, there's been a notion I've seen spreading throughout the Pokemon community that keeps coming up and up more and more regularly, that the yearly release pace of Pokemon these days has meant an ever-decreasing quality of the games. They're rushing them out too fast for the sake of the money and not spending enough time making the games good. And certainly that is a fair criticism to level at many developers out there on a yearly release cycle with their big brand. And what Game Freak should be doing is take an extra year or two just to make a truly amazing game. We, the true fans, won't care if there's just 1 year that goes by without a new Pokemon game. That's fine. We're okay to wait so long as we get a really good one in 2 years' time, or even 3 years' time. Whatever. Stop thinking so much about the money, you grubby business whose business is making games to make money. Think about the players instead. You'll find posts around, and probably videos too, of course, in the Pokemon communities that try to equate mathematically or demonstrably the release schedules with some kind of notion of objective quality of the games, to quote-unquote prove that the old games on slower release schedules were of higher objective quality. That's nonsense, of course. Complete prattle. Bull plop for several reasons. The first of which is some imagined past where it's only recently that a fast release cycle has become a thing. That's just not true. Pokemon is 26 years old, and since around 2008, we've had, with only two exceptions, 2011 and 2015, a major new core series Pokemon game or generational remake every single year. So a yearly cadence to release is hardly a modern phenomenon, and it's probably fair to say the largest portion of the fanbase still playing Pokemon these days came aboard after that yearly cycle was established. But while the timeline of releases is objective, quality of course is not. Quality is subjective, so there's no truly honest way to quantify if the release schedule has led to worse games, because worse is subjective. The sales numbers certainly don't reflect that in any correlating way. So let's move past that and onto the talk of Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet specifically being too soon. because it is unusual for two major core Pokemon games from Game Freak to be released in the same year, and the criticism and expectation that it's rushed and therefore will be crap. So, exactly how rushed is it? I mean, it is releasing in the same year as Pokemon Legends Arceus, which itself was a huge step in Pokemon history. It took more gambles with design, more chances on gameplay loops, changed more, affected more. It was a big risk for a company so historically extremely risk adverse. They have barely changed the core game design principles and gameplay loops of Pokemon in a quarter century after all. They are really scared to fiddle with this in case they break it and ruin everything. And with Legends, a game this different, this new, it must have been a huge and difficult challenge for Game Freak. So how could they possibly move on to an entirely new game this quickly and still make it work? Well, let's narrow it all down to the modern era and take the timeline for the yearly schedule of releases of the Nintendo Switch specifically. 2018 saw Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. It's fair to say they're not really true core games because they were quite dumbed down and designed to get younger players on board with the brand again, but they were really good games in my opinion, very fun, delightful in fact I think was the word I used at the time. But it was internally developed at Game Freak, and we know from various interviews that its development cycle was a little over 2 years. It featured a team of about 100 Game Freak employees, which is quite a small team for a game in a franchise this big, but again, it wasn't really a true core game. And the credits for the game do show some of it was outsourced to at least half a dozen other companies, which is not uncommon for game development. In 2019, we got Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. Development of this title was started just before the 2017 release of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, the last 3DS Pokemon titles. So that got around 2 years of development time. The team consisted of 200-odd Game Freak employees and another 100-odd from Creatures Inc., who were doing the 3D modeling and whatnot. And of course, in 2020, the following year, the DLC packs for Sword and Shield were released. We can safely presume these were developed by the same 200-odd Game Freak employees who developed the main game. In 2021, we got Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pokemon Shining Pearl. This remake title was not developed by Game Freak internally, but instead was entirely outsourced to ILCA, who did get guidance and feedback from Game Freak to make sure they were doing it right, but Game Freak were not the core force behind the development of this game. Wasn't even made on Game Freak's internal engine. It was done in Unity. And this year, of course, we've got Pokemon Legends Arceus, an unusually bold change of direction for a series that has been, as I said, very resistant to stray from its quarter-decade-old game design recipe, but it worked. Many, including myself, are calling it the best Pokemon game in at least the last decade. As flawed as it may be in many respects, see my twin videos about both sides of that coin if you're curious for more about the love-hate relationship I have with this game. But then, of course, a few days ago came the surprise announcement of Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet. And not so much of a surprise in the announcement of them. It's around this time of year that we almost always get the first teasers of the next Pokemon game coming. The surprise is that it's also releasing this year. 2 major core series Pokemon games in the same year, not remakes, not spin-offs, but both mainline games on the Nintendo Switch from Game Freak. And this combination of things is what has a lot of people worried that it's being rushed. But here's a fun fact, but really the only more nerdy and obsessive Pokemon poker fans tend to remember. About a decade ago, back when Pokemon Black and Pokemon White were in development, we learned that Game Freak have started using 2 separate development teams in-house. Capcom does the same thing with Monster Hunter, by the way, allowing longer, more careful development cycles between releases while keeping a faster release cycle to keep the brand active. The Monster Hunter series isn't quite as aggressive as Pokemon is about this, but they do use 2 separate teams for the same kind of idea. So now, between 2 Game Freak teams and the use of outsourcing on titles like Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, you start to see that the development of Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet is a lot longer than some people are assuming that it is. Scarlet and Violet have been being worked on for at least a few years. It's a safe guess that the team working on Scarlet and Violet are the team that did Sword and Shield, and it's safe to assume that the whole team wasn't required for the development of the 2 DLC packs for Sword and Shield, so we can assume, again pretty safely, that the earliest development and design stages for Scarlet and Violet started just as the main Sword and Shield title released in 2019. So, by the time Scarlet and Violet release in late 2022, that gives us a timeline of around 3 years of development time, or about a year longer than has been average for the core games in the Switch era. And before that, actually, around 2 years was common in the 3DS era too, again, with 2 teams working on a kind of tick-tock cycle, so that was a fresh game every year. So no, I don't think it's fair to say Scarlet and Violet are rushed. It's the opposite, actually. The thing that worries me about all this, though, is that given that Legends was such a big change, and from what we can tell from the teaser trailer, Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet share the same engine at least, the same open field design, possibly even true open world. The official website itself does use the words open world, and Legends is not true open world, it's fairer to call it open field. But I worry that there's not enough time now for the team on Scarlet and Violet to incorporate player feedback on what didn't work that well in Legends, or indeed worked really well, and that we want more of. I worry that it's already far too deep in the development process to take on board what fans hated and loved best about the basic mechanics in Legends, so we can see those systems further fine-tuned with the benefit of hindsight from millions of players. But it's also fair to say that creative direction in game development should not ever be solely at the whim of the player base. That's how you wind up with mindless, generic, uninspired groupthink garbage. Legends took risks, big risks, and it paid off big. And I'm curious to see if Scarlet and Violet will expand on that, or take an entirely new bag of risks, or, and I hope this third option isn't the one they've chosen to do, take fewer risks and roll back too far into the older ways. Because for the last 2 years, the design team will not have known if the players would respond really well or really negatively to the risks that Legends took. It could have been a disaster. Will they second guess themselves? Will they have played it too safe, just in case Legends changes didn't work and it was a failure critically and commercially? Is Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet a backup plan? Is that why it's releasing the same year as Legends? Is it a more traditional Pokémon game in every other respect except for being, hopefully, open world? Is this the safe option? Is that why 2 games like this are coming out in the same year? Many questions remain, of course, but one question is demonstrably dumb. Is the game rushed? No, it's not. As I've explained, odds are, thanks to the outsourcing of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet have had a slower development than most of the past decade's Pokémon games have had, and in fact a whole extra year above what everything else has been getting. And I'm filled with a bit of hope at that thought. Because until Legends rolled around, it's fair to say that this old schooler Pokémoner was feeling the series' whiff of staleness a bit. I mean, I was still having fun with them, but yeah, I was starting to pine pretty hard for something truly new. So, fingers crossed. Thanks for watching. Thanks as always to the patrons. I am Blunty. Hopefully you found this interesting. I found it interesting to talk about at least. Glad it's off my mind now. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.